After a tense silence, Jin Nazal stomped across car 1. Then she sat down on an empty seat. She didn't reply. She simply closed her eyes with a blank expression. Clearly, she was holding back her anger. Honestly, challenging a superior during an official mission was a crazy move. I'm sorry, Assistant Manager. But once this is over, I believe the results will be efficient enough for her to accept them. For now, though, I needed to act quickly. We were nearing the first altar. Supervisor Dolphin seemed to think the same, as she began unlocking the door.
All right, let's head out and pick 45 wicked people to drop.
Supervisor, about that. Could we approach it a little differently?
I opened the door to car 1.
Oh, what is this place?
The passengers who had been discussing whether to break down the door looked relieved when it opened, but recoiled in shock upon seeing the horrifying state of car 1. Their fear faded slightly when they saw me. Probably because the answer sheet they trusted on this train was still standing.
Thank you all for waiting.
Are you all right, Venerable Pathfinder?
That person earlier.
I'm fine, of course.
I glanced at Jin Nazal and forced a bitter smile.
She was helping me snap out of it after I discovered something shocking. Everyone, I have something to tell you.
I took a moment to steady myself as I faced the hundreds of expectant eyes before me.
This time, there is no limit to who can leave through the window, and this will be the last time.
What does that mean?
It's exactly as it sounds.
I spoke slowly and clearly.
After this, the trial will be over.
The passengers murmured, some asking what I meant, and whether everyone still needed to jump through the window.
Originally, yes. Everyone was supposed to go out one by one, but there's been a change.
The passengers fell silent, listening intently.
Everyone here has qualified. Yes, anyone can go through the window and pass the trial.
I raised my hand to stop those who were already stepping forward.
However, this time, it will be painful.
I said it plainly and honestly.
When you fall, you will feel searing pain as you walk. You may even feel the urge to tear your own flesh off. You'll have to fight through the pain and the voice echoing in your head, taking one step at a time toward the light.
The passengers fell silent. They began exchanging glances and whispering.
This isn't what you promised.
Yeah, you said you'd protect us.
Of course. If you don't wish to participate, you don't have to. But there is one thing I can guarantee.
According to the confidential document from the Disaster Management Bureau about the Ixen Express, where this same ghost story ended safely in the past, when this ghost story ends, the passengers will suddenly awaken at the starting point of the train, as if waking from a nightmare. They'll brush it off as a bad dream and go back to living their normal lives. The events aboard the Tamra Express will fade like an unpleasant dream within half a day. And eventually, they'll forget everything. A few changes were observed among those who voluntarily jumped through the window. I remembered the passage. A passenger who habitually verbally abused their subordinates apologized immediately after getting off the train and never did it again. A passenger who used to jaywalk out of habit felt too ashamed and stopped doing it. Another passenger, who had only considered volunteering at a youth center, actually started doing it. Even a scammer involved in an insurance fraud scheme abandoned the plan and handed over information to the police. Overall improvements in morality, self-esteem, and pride were observed. As long as the train didn't endlessly loop but ended safely as it had in the past, the horrifying pain from this ghost story would remain nothing more than a fleeting nightmare, quickly forgotten. But the positive changes would remain. That's why when this ghost story happened on the Ixen Express, the Disaster Management Bureau didn't label it as a disaster. They simply documented it in a confidential report. In short, if I exaggerated just a little,
Those who go through the window this time will feel proud of themselves when they emerge from the tunnel. Instead of regretting what you did yesterday, you'll be someone who steps forward in the moment. You'll meet a better version of yourself without shame.
Is that the answer?
I met the passenger's gaze and slowly nodded.
That much I can promise you.
The crowd fell silent again.
Then, let me ask once more. Is there anyone here willing to endure the pain and go through the window?
I turned my head. Supervisor Dolphin had raised her hand. One by one, more hands went up. On their faces was a strange sense of exhilaration, overcoming their fear. This was crowd psychology, a double-edged sword. But after 14 loops, the collective bond and influence that had built up among the passengers now manifested as something reverent. Their courage inspired those closest to them. In an instant, nearly half the passengers on the train had voluntarily raised their hands. The ending I had worked so hard for, even playing the role of a cult leader over 14 loops, was now right in front of me.
Thank you. I will go with you.
Just as the Silver Heart owner had once envisioned.
Supervisor, I'll go now. I'm fine going alone.
Dolphin Supervisor volunteered to be the first to jump at the first altar. Since someone had to take the lead and jump alone, and there needed to be someone to stay behind to manage and confirm the final group of passengers, I had to remain until the end. However, Dolphin Supervisor wasn't entirely alone.
Then I'll go too. For the first one.
It's better to do it first if you're going to do it anyway.
There were so many volunteers that even at the first altar, a few people ended up jumping together, and we haven't begun in earnest yet.
Remaining distance 4.
But no one backed out, even at the final decision point. With Dolphin Supervisor leading the charge, more than 7 people rushed and jumped through the window into the first altar. The train quickly passed through the altar, and the surroundings brightened once more. The passengers blinked at the now familiar scene, repeated for the 14th time, a sight that had become routine. Of course, it didn't seem much different from the previous jumps. But that was because the real effects of not having the painkiller only kicked in after they'd already fallen. And then, a strange reaction began to occur. People started thinking, was it not that big of a deal after all? Some suddenly decided they wanted to jump too.
Excuse me, I'd like to go as well.
This particular passenger was someone Dolphin's supervisor had previously flagged as a candidate for sacrifice after witnessing their nasty behavior. Early in the loops, this person had raised their fists and shouted things like, "Get lost before I punch you." But now, they conveniently seemed to have forgotten all that and approached me as if nothing had happened.
Then you can jump from the second altar.
No, I'd like to go with you, specifically with you, Venerable Pathfinder, at the very end.
If that's what you want, what a rude person. I heard the passenger talking with someone in the background.
Hey, what are you doing? Why are you suddenly volunteering to jump? Can't you see what's happening? I'm sure if we jump, we'll get some special ability or reward. It's obvious. You've got to ride the wave when it comes. And all that talk about pain, probably just a bluff to scare us off.
You'll actually be in searing pain. Well, they'll confirm it themselves soon enough. Still, it wasn't my job to correct these people's misconceptions. I let them believe what they wanted. I simply added their name to the list of volunteers and took another look at their face to make sure I had the right person. That mole on this person's cheek. I hadn't noticed it before because I'd rushed past him earlier, but now it stood out. And he's from Car 6, right? I remembered someone with those exact features. That's the passenger who was supposed to become the cult leader in one of the previous loops. Oh my. Did he lose the role to you, Mr. Rodeer? Ugh. As much as I hated to admit it, it seemed like that was the case. I guess with how smoothly the past 14 loops have been going, things can happen. Still, it was much better than the chaos from the original, where the cult leader dragged passengers around, harvesting their organs for live sacrifices and tossing their hollowed bodies out the window. The important thing was that most of the volunteers were calm and determined as they headed toward the altar.
Let's become better people.
The atmosphere grew oddly positive. Some passengers even teared up while waiting for their turn.
This is my first time really challenging myself.
As the passengers encouraged each other and shared honest stories, I turned to look at one person standing off to the side. Baek Deok-soo, who was looking at all these people with a look of utter disbelief.
Pardon me. I don't know why you're looking at me like that, but I'm not going to jump.
I hadn't expected him to volunteer anyway. Baek Deok-soo lowered his voice this time.
If you give me one of those painkillers, I might consider jumping.
Oh? Then will you use it right now?
No, after this is all over and we get off the train.
He really thought he could get a free item, huh?
Ah, we've reached the 5th altar, Venerable Pathfinder.
Yes, let's proceed.
Leaving Baek Deok-soo behind, I mingled with the passengers, offering advice and applause to the volunteers. It was my way of fulfilling the role of the Silver Heart holder, About 3 hours passed. At last, the final moment had arrived. I stood together with the remaining volunteers. This time, more than 20 people were lined up to jump through the window. This number is insane. To be honest, it scared me. If these people started writhing in pain and resenting me afterward, would my mental state hold out? Without hesitation, 2 or 3 people held hands and leapt through the window one after another. I watched until the last of the volunteers jumped, then moved to the window myself.
Are you really going, Venerable Sir?
Technically, I could step back now without affecting the clear. Are you going to use that excellent painkiller again, friend? I returned the painkiller to my pocket and launched myself through the window. My body tumbled into the crimson corridor of the altar after falling from the high-speed train. The moment my senses began to register the surroundings, it was pure, unfiltered hell. I couldn't believe I hadn't been disturbed by this scene before. Despite having experienced this twice, the difference without the happy maker was overwhelming. The ground writhed with countless rotting flesh pieces, squirming like worms, while decayed blood and filth formed a grotesque sea. Are these hallucinations? No, I have the silver ring, so I should be— No, stop! Stop thinking. I took deep breaths, allowing the ring's protective effects to kick in. At least the dreadful voice that had once echoed through my mind was gone. Searing pain engulfed me. Each letter felt like molten wax searing my entire body. The absence of the voice didn't lessen the agony. Around me, those still hearing it were writhing in torment.
Madness. This is madness.
What's it saying? Sin? Sin?
Cries, screams, and chaotic babbling filled the altar. My head spun. Nearby, someone collapsed into the pile of flesh. I bit back a scream and helped pull them out. No, that's not right. It wasn't that the pain had decreased. It was that where my body was in contact with the other person, on my back and shoulders, the pain didn't register, making the rest more tolerable. I realized something. Where there was physical contact, the scorching pain wasn't felt. The body wasn't exposed to the altar's environment.
Everyone, stay close to each other. It helps with the pain.
I linked arms with someone nearby as I shouted. The message spread quickly.
Don't expose your bare skin. That's where the voice comes from. Grab someone's hand.
Groups of scattered people began clustering together, huddling close.
Get off me, you piece of shit!
Of course, not everyone was coping well. Some still panicked, shoving others into the flesh piles.
You fucking bastard! I won't let this go! You lied! You Lee something!
That one man, who had arrogantly joined the group earlier in hopes of gaining special powers, screamed curses at me before sinking into the mire. But over 20 people managed to band together, pressing close like penguins.
It's bearable. It's bearable.
Linked together, we interlocked arms and pushed forward, sticking as closely as possible. Our intertwined hands gripped one another firmly, preventing any self-harming reactions. Feet scattered the decaying flesh as we ran. Screams and cries echoed, but so did words of encouragement and determined shouts. A shared sense of purpose.
We're almost there.
The light drew closer, slowly but surely. The people let out desperate cheers as they hurled themselves into the light. I, too, was engulfed by the light, my consciousness slowly elevating into a distant euphoria, though the voice had long since vanished. Suddenly, a thought occurred to me. Perhaps this test that the ghost train presented had never been properly solved until now. And at this moment, I felt like I had glimpsed the direction of the answer. What if, by having all the passengers on the train jump together and go through this process, we could reach an unknown world?
What is this?
All around me, I heard people gasping for breath and letting out small groans. The distinct jerking movements of people waking up from a nightmare were evident. As I saw chairs shaking across the train car, I immediately lifted my head to check the train screen.
Letters on the display.
With a high-pitched sound, the high-speed train began pulling out of the station.
Oh, we made it back safely.
I exhaled, my body slumping fully into the seat as the tension drained away. But the moment I glanced at the seat in front of me, I snapped to attention. Assistant Manager Jin Nassel. She was sitting there, arms crossed, silently staring at the ceiling of the train with an unreadable expression. Of course, it was all part of a dream now, and since she hadn't jumped through the window in the end, she probably wasn't too angry. But still, I should still do what needs to be done. I quickly rummaged through my pocket and pulled out something designed to restore energy to a no-nonsense, efficiency-obsessed superior like her. It was something that all three of us in this section had.
Assistant manager.
The dream essence collector is full.
Clear golden liquid shimmered inside the collector as it sloshed. Since we were technically on a business trip, we had brought dream essence collectors with us. By clearing this ghost story, they had been filled. If we had cleared the ghost story back when it was still just the Ixan Express, we'd probably only get an F or D grade, but an abnormal phenomena had occurred, and the route was extended. And then there were the double-digit loops, and there were numerous people jumping through the altars this time. The same grade as the darkness we were supposed to explore in Mokpo. Now that the collectors were full, entering a new darkness wouldn't have any benefit. Assistant Manager Jin Nasol's expression finally shifted.
Then we don't have to go to Mokpo anymore. We can return at the next station.
Relief washed over me, and I let out a deep breath. For a corporate worker, going back home early is truly the best gift. Just then, I heard murmuring from the seats behind me.
Hey, I had the weirdest dream. The train was running on water or something.
Haha, what? That sounds like nonsense.
But it was fun. Everything was chaotic, and there was even this saint-like figure they called the Venerable Pathfinder. That guy sitting right in front of us.
It seemed my stint as a cult leader had left a lasting impression on some people. I need to get out of here. I quickly excused myself to my superiors and discreetly headed for the restroom. Okay, I'll hide here for a few minutes until the details of the dream started fading from their memories. You're like a celebrity avoiding overzealous fans. It was embarrassingly accurate. No, it's actually a great ending. A faint sense of pride spread through my chest. A sense of peace that the original passengers of the Tamra Express had never experienced. Because back then, the ending had been far more horrific. It was seared into my memory even without referencing the wiki. At one point in the endless loops, the passengers' minds had completely broken. They had descended into collective madness, becoming something no longer recognizable as human. By then, the train cars had become a living nightmare, where the mere concept of deciding to jump through the windows was lost in the sea of pain. But if you repeat the process enough times, there's always a chance that someone stumbles upon the right answer. After countless restarts and endless time, they eventually gathered the correct number of sacrifices for the 9th altar and escaped this anomaly. But in a sense, they never truly escaped. Even for those who experienced being offered once, the trauma lingered for several minutes afterward, as if waking from a terrible nightmare. So what happens to those who endure it hundreds or thousands of times? They could never escape the nightmare. The passengers presumably did not realize that the supernatural phenomenon had ended, and they had returned to reality. They mistakenly believed they were still trapped in the loop. In fact, as their mental strength partially recovered upon returning to reality, their despair intensified, leading them to act even more irrationally and violently. Thus, even in the real world, hell descended. The majority of the passengers killed and dismembered each other on the spot, on their seats, in the aisles, and near the windows. After that horrifying chaos and madness, the train derailed. This was how the Tamra Express disaster met its terrible conclusion. Thankfully, this outcome hadn't become reality. Relief, I let out a deep breath of relief. Now that everything was over, I finally had the time to question a lingering mystery. The only known employee from Daydream Inc. who had survived this incident in the original scenario. The same employee who presumably had the same silver ring I was currently wearing, having bartered it with 3 civilians at Death Lane. Where exactly had that person been? Or rather, were they even here? The only company employee I had directly confirmed aboard the train earlier was Baek Deok-soo. And since I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble or draw attention by sniffing out all the employees, I let it be. Well, in any case, it all worked out. If they were aboard, they must have survived since the incident had ended peacefully. What mattered was that the tragedy originally tied to this train had been averted. It's time to leave. Someone, impatient from waiting, was knocking on the bathroom door. I quickly jotted down a few notes in my smartphone's memo app to hold on to the fading memories of the past 14 loops, splashed cold water on my face, and stepped out of the train restroom. The person waiting outside barged in the moment the door opened. They must have been in a hurry. I passed by them and headed back to my seat.
You fucking piece of shit.
I instinctively lowered my gaze. The blade had narrowly grazed past my chest. I immediately stepped back while grabbing the attacker's forearm and twisting it sharply. The cutter blade fell to the floor with a sharp clang as I pushed the attacker down and pinned him to the floor. That's when I saw his face.
You bastard. Ah!
Cold sweat trickled down my back. The wannabe cult leader.
Fuck! It hurts, damn it! It hurts!
It was the same person who was left behind at the 9th altar.
You lied to me? Then die, you bastard, you piece of...
I forcefully slammed him into the floor once more. A short, dull impact rang out. My hands were drenched in sweat. Did he lose his mind after we left him behind there? Considering his already bad personality, he had probably experienced even more suffering during the offering because of his greater guilt. Still, even if it had been a nightmare, it must have been a particularly severe one for him. What an uncontrollable temper. No wonder he ended up something unknown. I wiped the sweat off my face. At least the blade hadn't cut through my chest or caused any pain. Good thing I wrapped myself in protective packaging beforehand. I hadn't expected to be dragged into another ghost story during our trip, but I had prepared for the possibility by layering my skin with a protective wrapping item before departing. The item, Prapfer 12B357 Na, was something I'd bought from the alien shop. Given the death prediction I had received, it had been a sensible precaution. Still, I didn't think I'd be dodging death from a knife-wielding maniac rather than getting done in at a ghost story. Was this the death prediction I had been warned about? Did I just narrowly avoid it? What do you think, Braun? An unsettling feeling crept down my spine. I had just been slashed across the chest. Though the packaging had protected my skin, the outer layer of my suit, specifically the left chest pocket, had taken damage. And in that pocket was... My heart pounding, I hurriedly reached into my suit pocket. My trembling fingers pulled out the fluffy animal plushie inside. Cotton fell to the ground. The pink fabric dangled, torn and frayed. As the broken plush keychain swayed in my hand, I stood frozen, staring at the plush doll, now split in two. The coin tumbled out from the lower half of the torn plush toy's insides. I hurriedly clamped it shut, pressing the two torn halves together as if that would fix it. But of course there was no response. The upper half of the plush toy merely slid off the bottom half. I turned my head and closed my eyes, pressing the plush toy close to my ear. There was a faint vibration from the plushie. It was definitely a signal. But it was incredibly faint, like the static from a stray radio frequency. He was still there, in that case. I immediately locked the bathroom door and pulled out the small, checkered bathtub with golden legs from the tattoo on my wrist. The so-called bathtub of youth. The tub settled on the floor, and I carefully placed the nearly severed plush toy inside. I picked up the box cutter the unconscious passenger had dropped during the failed attack. Without hesitation, I slashed my forearm. Blood poured from the opened veins. There's no time for alternatives in this kind of emergency. Cutting the unconscious guy's arm was risky. He might wake up or I wouldn't be able to stop the bleeding. I can't handle any more chaos. My blood spilled into the tub. The scent of wood and fragrant aromatics wafted through the air. The plush toy began to swell as if soaking up the bath salt's essence. Its fur grew cleaner, shinier, and its pebble-like eyes shimmered mysteriously. And then it started to expand rapidly. It seemed to reach a threshold, soaking in the bath until it grew from keychain size to something that filled both my hands. It now resembled the original Good Friend plush. The bow-shaped hair tie snapped under the pressure and flew off, landing against the tub's side. The transformation was undeniable. The plush toy was still silent. Holding my breath, I leaned in again, pressing my ear close to it. The faint vibrations from earlier were gone. The plush toy, its body still torn, merely floated on the aromatic bathwater. I stared at it again. The plush toy, now large enough to fill the small tub, gleamed as if it had just been handcrafted by an artisan. But it remained severed. The bathtub of youth restored youth, but it didn't heal wounds. I knew it, but I had tried anyway. The Good Friend plush was broken. I took a deep breath. I could get another one. Yes. I just had to get it from its original source instead of relying on the merch box. The cheerful theme park still existed. The Good Friend plush was a souvenir sold in its gift shop. I was going to go there anyway, so this is actually efficient. I could get a new plush there and summon it again like before. The method for summoning a good friend didn't summon the same specific being. It summoned someone from the other world. There's no guarantee the same one will appear again. In fact, it would be strange if it did. I had enjoyed reading about how different beings appeared with each summoning. I had no choice but to admit it at this point. It wasn't because of any mental contamination. I had genuinely grown attached to this strange plush toy. But who wouldn't, right? After all, he really had been a good friend. He encouraged me when I was struggling, got angry alongside me when I was mad, had deep conversations with me, and stayed up at night watching comedy shows. He was the kind of friend who prioritized me without any calculation. The kind of friend you could only meet back when you were a kid in school. Let's see what else I can do.
Maybe I should try sewing it back together.
If that doesn't work, I can search for a recovery item, dive into a ghost story that repairs items, or dig through any relevant information and attempt something new. There are plenty of options. For my sanity's sake.
Let's give it a shot.
I calmed down a bit. The overwhelming panic I had felt from the unexpected incident was subsiding, replaced by a sense of clarity and calculation. First, let's clean this up. I reached into the blood bathtub and pulled out bronze upper and lower halves, dangling separately. I was about to neatly gather the stuffing and store the plush toy, when a piece of fabric flapping on the back of the plush caught my eye. It was a small silk tag sewn along the seam that connected the head to the body. It seemed like the faint traces that had previously emerged during the last bath had now fully returned. The Good Friends product label, maybe. You know the kind. Labels indicating origin, washing instructions, handling guidelines, or even a creator's or buyer's signature. My gaze naturally fell on it. The label looked properly formatted with a structure typical of product tags. Strange, tiny, incomprehensible symbols were written in rows. But that wasn't what stood out the most. Across all that information, there was something scrawled in thick black marker, almost like a form of censorship.
Label removal required.
A massive hand grabbed the tag. It was a hand wearing an elegant, tailored dress glove. The thumb quickly covered most of the label's text as the hand yanked the tag.